Chapter 8 All I Want Is January 1979. So, Barty says, jumping onto the foot of Regulus's bed. It groans under the weight as he flops onto his stomach to watch Regulus, sat cross-legged on the cold floors, arrange his books. Potter. What about him? Regulus scoffs, already irritated with Barty's tone. It's suggestive, and Regulus can't do suggestive right now. He's tired, and he'll admit it's made him grumpy. The train ride took forever, the Scottish countryside unappealing. Dinner was an endless parade of holiday chatter and exhausting small talk. He has, quite frankly, had enough torture for one day. All he wants is to sleep. Instead, his friends are clearly intent on interrogating him. Across the room, Evan snores from where he's rifling through his trunk. Salazar knows what he's looking for. It's not as though he's organized any of it. There are scattered clothes all around him, and Regulus has to look away before his irritation spikes to an untamable level. Unfortunately, the only other place to look is at Barty, who smirks and waggles his brow when their eyes meet. Potter's hot. Congratulations, Regulus deadpans. Your eyes are working. Oh, don't be like that, Evan says, emerging from his trunk with a worn t-shirt dangling from his fingers. Regulus is pretty sure it belongs to Barty. You think so too. Actually, no. You think he's gorgeous. So does the entire witch population of England, Regulus snaps. What's your point? The witches of England didn't spend a week alone with him, though, Barty teases. You did. Regulus shakes his head, offering his friends a half-hearted shrug. His parents were there too. It was family Christmas, nothing more. Barty and Evan exchange a weighted glance. It makes Regulus feel itchy, like spider eggs hatching under his skin. Desperate to change the topic or end this conversation, Regulus rolls his eyes and pointedly goes back to arranging his books on his bedside table. It's futile. His friends do not take the hint. So, you don't like him at all? Asks Barty cautiously. Not even a little bit? And not, a teeny crush inside? No. Evan closes his trunk with a loud thud and walks over to Regulus's bed. He collapses on his stomach beside Barty, so they are shoulder to shoulder, both staring down at Regulus, who's fiddling pointedly with his books. Come on, Reg, Evan laments. You're not as subtle as you think you are. We're asking to be polite, but we already know you fancy him. I do not fancy him. It's not a lie per se. Regulus doesn't just fancy James, all right? It's something else, something more. Fancy is such a silly trivial word. It's not enough. It doesn't do justice to what Regulus thinks of when he pictures James's face. James is complicated. He's a friend, but not quite the way Barty and Evan are. He's family, but not quite the way Sirius is. He makes Regulus feel safe and understood. He's an ally, but can also be a challenging opponent. A steady presence next to Regulus when he's lost inside a book. A mentor in the air. He looks up to James for his quiet brilliance and also thinks he's impossibly silly at the same time. See? Regulus's feelings about James are entirely too complicated for a word like fancy. All right, but he mutters, rolling his eyes. You don't fancy him then. There was something in the air, okay? At the pub. Stale ale, cigarette smoke, and sweat, Regulus says in clipped tone. It's a pub, Barty. That's what's in the air. What are you on about? Just, are you sure? Positive. Okay. Barty slides off the bed, hands up in surrender, just making sure. Regulus gives him a small, easy smile, a half shrug carefully constructed to convey disinterest, but not so much it would be suspicious. Barty and Evan might know him better than anyone, but even they can see past years of learning how to shield himself. When Regulus mutters, I'm pretty tired, I will see you for breakfast. Both of them nod and finally let the topic go. As soon as he's safe behind his closed curtains, Regulus rescues his jar from under the bed and sets it next to him as he reclines. He's exhausted, but before he lets sleep claim him, he dips his hand inside the jar to run his fingers over soft petals. He's back at Hogwarts, rested after a much-needed break, well fed, since it's impossible not to be, while under Effie Potter's roof. And yet, the petals, more of them than when the holiday started, piled one on top of the other to cover the bottom of his jar like a colorful blanket. Regulus still has no idea where they are coming from or why. He doesn't remember the dreams that might clue him into why they keep appearing on his pillow when he wakes. He is anxious. He is not. The petals come regardless. So many of them now. He closes the jar and lets it rest under his bed. Casts a quiet protection spell, then slips his wand under his pillow. All of it out of sight for a little while. Tomorrow he will start fresh. Think about his petal problem and Quidditch and newts and professional scouts and... Oh, he's totally spent by the mere idea of all the thinking he will have to do the rest of term. For now, he'll think of hazel eyes behind gold-framed glasses, a brilliant smile, and a promise that if the world was ending, James would come find him. January passes in a blur. Regulus days are consumed by newts, grueling Quidditch practices, and far too little sleep. More often than not, he wakes up in the library to Madame Pince nudging his shoulder gently, her voice soft when she whispers, Mr. Black, the library is about to close. It's time for you to return to your dormitory. Most days he goes to bed frustrated. Newts are so all-consuming that he hasn't had a chance to research his flower problem. All his time in the library is spent writing and revising essays, and even then, he feels like he's constantly playing catch-up. It's exhausting. The first few days back to school, he tried to slip into the herbology and healthcare section during his prefect run to see if he could squeeze in a bit of reading. But for some reason, unbeknownst to him, students came back from winter holidays well, as Barty put it last week, horny. It's like everyone went and got together before winter holidays, spent Christmas apart, and is trying to make up for it now, Barty says during Thursday morning breakfast, his plate full of food and his mouth no different. Regulus grimaces. Chew with your mouth closed, Crouch. Merlin, you were an animal. Did your silencing charm not work last night? Because Evan told me the exact same. Fuck, that hurt. Barty glares at Regulus rubbing the side of his head. No need for violence, Reggie. Just because you are the only Hogwarts student not getting any doesn't mean you need to make it everyone else's problem. I'm not making it everyone else's problem. Oh, so the 12 additional students in detention the other day, all couples by the way, weren't your doing? Barty snorts and reaches for a muffin. I know they weren't Hannah's. I've heard a rumor or two about her after-hours proclivities. Not that I'm shaming. No, no, I'm in full support. I just know which one of you is bitter enough to hand out countless detention and why. Regulus fights the urge to stick out his tongue at his friends. Hannah, head girl and a Hufflepuff, hasn't been helpful at all these past few weeks during their rounds. They are meant to dole out detention to students found in alcoves, library sections, empty classrooms, the astronomy tower, all places frequented by happy couples. Instead, she's taking advantage of the quiet halls to snog whichever boy she fancies that week. Regulus is not jealous of Hannah, or anyone for that matter. Really, he's not. He's just a bit tired of turning corners only to be confronted with hands to fire up shirts and skirts. Most of them have been seventh years who don't have time to snug themselves breathless during the day, but he gave a fourth-year couple detention just last night. Truly, the school is descending into madness, or at least Regulus thinks so. Look, Reg, Evan starts pouring himself more pumpkin juice. It's fine you believe you don't have the world's biggest crush on one Regulus slams his elbow on the table, points his fork in Evan's direction and hisses, "Finish that sentence, and I will show you how good my wandless magic can be." Merlin, you really need to get laid. With a sigh, Barty nudges Evan with his shoulder and says under his breath, "Do you think we can convince someone in our year to take one for the team? We might have to add a disclaimer though. Well bite. Might may." Ha ha, very funny. Regulus makes a face at his friends, his irritation spiking. "I mean it when I say I'm fine being alone. I have newts, Quidditch, head boy responsibilities. I think dating would be too much. I leave that all to you." "You don't have to date, Reggie. Salazar, you really are archaic. Any day now, those beautiful black locks are going to turn white as snow." Barty swings his leg over the bench and gets to his feet, brushing off his robes. "I, for one, have a date with Charms class. Evan, love, I'm sorry you had to find out this way." Evan waves a hand absently in his direction. Focus narrowed in on the morning copy of Daily Prophet. "Charms class didn't suck your dick last night. I'm not that worried about that." Regulus makes an exaggerated retching noise. "I did not need to know that." "Oh, good. The silencing charm worked then." Bart leans down, a hand underneath Evan's jaw to tilt his head back slightly. "You're going to kill your test in potions. Just remember what I taught you, okay?" But Galapot's third law doesn't make sense. Just remember, the whole is more than the sum of its parts, Evan mumbles, a little defeated. Barty seems pleased. He kisses Evan full on the mouth and Regulus looks away. They always make him feel as though he's intruding on an incredibly private moments, despite the fact they are not all that bothered with privacy. When Barty says, "Bye, baby. See you later. You've got this," a little more tender than he usually speaks to the rest of the populace, Regulus busies himself with the now cold eggs on his plate. He pushes them around, but his appetite is long gone. "Hey, Reggie." He looks up to find Evan looking at him over the edge of the prophet. "It's okay if you don't want to tell us about you know who, but don't wait forever for him, yeah? I'm going to pretend like I haven't seen you crushing on him for years." Evan holds up a hand when Regulus opens his mouth to disagree. "But I'm not going to pretend like I don't hate seeing you miserable. You might enjoy being alone, but I don't think anyone enjoys feeling lonely." Regulus pushes to his feet with enough force the bench skids on the cobblestone floors, and a few students yelp in surprise. "I need to get transfiguration." He, he all but runs out of the great hall. His robe's too hot, he's tied to tie around his neck. He reaches up to adjust it, pulling, and takes the stairs two at a time. Sorry, he mumbles to a boy twice his size. He's just run right into him and nearly knocked all the book from his arms. But Regulus doesn't stop moving. He finds an alcove somewhere tucked away and slips inside it. There's a suit of armor to hide him. It shouldn't surprise him that Evan and Barty have him all figured out. They've been dorm mates for years and friends long enough. They know Regulus in a way most people don't. Hell, they know Regulus better than Sirius does sometimes. It's true, Regulus isn't frustrated about the couples. Sure, they are a reminder of what he doesn't and can't have. But more than that, they are standing in the way of him and a solid night of research in the library. He spends so much time doling out detention slips that when midnight rolls around and his rounds are over, he's exhausted. If he wants to get a morning Quidditch practice in, he can't sleep more than a few hours. No, Regulus isn't frustrated because he's lonely. He's frustrated because it's been 3 weeks since returning to Hogwarts. There were more petals in his jar, and he has never been further from an answer in his life. It happens on an unsuspecting Saturday night. For the first time in weeks, Regulus goes an entire night without giving a couple detention. It seems that maybe, just maybe, he's managed to deter the worst of them from sneaking around in the corridors after hours. Finally. Hannah is on the other side of the castle according to the map, and the other prefects are all on their respective floors. So it's easy for Regulus to walk quickly through the halls, down a set of stairs, and make a beeline for the library. His plan is to start with curses. Surely someone must have done something to him between 6th and 7th year. Maybe a prefect miffed they didn't get head boy. Maybe someone he turned down during Quidditch tryouts. Maybe. Ouch! What the? Regulus reaches up to touch the back of his head. A sharp pain has brought him to a stop in a corridor dimly lit by sconces on the wall. Not a usual part of the castle for him, but a shortcut to the library if he takes the right passage. He turns, still rubbing the back of his head. Hello? Is someone there? Silence. Until... Are those wing bits? If you are playing a prank, know that the tension is twice as long if it's after hours. Regulus calls down the corridor, his irritation sparking once again. He was so close, the library just within reach, but now he's back on duty, the pin on his chest, an annoyance rather than an honor. Hello? Oh, for fuck's sakes, are you... Ouch! Something smacks his arm, then his thigh. Sharp stings again from an unknown source. He can hear wing beats, but he can't see. As though someone has bewitched invisible hummingbirds to flutter about the corridor and stab him with their bills. He reaches for his wand tucked in his robe, but there are more stings, incessant now, and he's fairly certain he's starting to wilt. Oh, fuck this, he mutters, turning sharp on his heel and marching down the corridor. Except the invisible hummingbirds follow him. They continue to poke, their wing beats unmistakable, and Regulus doesn't have the patience to deal with this anymore. Not tonight. He breaks into a hard run, rounding corners and slipping down corridors, his trainer skidding on rough stone. The hummingbirds follow him, their wing beats a steady thrum on his heel. He needs to find an empty classroom or somewhere he can wait out whatever hex this is. Without the proper counterspell, he'll spend hours deflecting them with no result. Shit. He's just rounded around the corner and finds himself faced with a single door at the end of the hall. It's an old thing with a brass handle. Nothing he's seen before, if he's honest. There are no other doors around, nowhere to hide. It will have to do. He breaks into a run again, rips the door open with far too much force, and slams it shut behind him. He leans against it, breathing heavily, and listens for wing beats. Instead, he hears little thuds in rapid succession until finally they stop. Ha, he says triumphant. Stupid birds. He closes his eyes and drops his head back against the door in an attempt to catch his breath. This part of the castle is unfamiliar to him. It's an older area where classrooms remain abandoned. He only knows about it because of James and Sirius, who claimed it's the best place for make-out session if you don't want a prefect to find you. The only problem is it's creepy as hell, Sirius used to say with a shudder. I feel like someone must have died there for it to feel so weird. But I'm not willing to ask in case they figure out Remus and I use it for late-night adventures. Regulus opted not to ask for further details, though he wishes he had now, standing in what looks like to be a large classroom. It's missing all of its desks, but the center of the room is marked by a sunken floor. All things considered, it's an unremarkable place, dim and decorated with cobwebs. Moonlight casts light and shadows throughout, but it's what Regulus sees across the room near where a professor might have stood that piques his interest. A mirror. His feet move before Regulus has time to think it through. Generally speaking, one shouldn't approach strange object in this castle. Magic is unpredictable, and Hogwarts has absorbed so much over the centuries that it wouldn't be odd for a corner of it to be haunted. So why is he being so uncharacteristically reckless? A breath catches in his throat when he realizes it's almost as though the mirror is calling to him. There's a thread tied behind his navel connected to the mirror, pulling him closer. Have a look. Regulus stops in front of it. Its clawed feet are old-fashioned, and the golden frame is burnished. Whatever else this mirror is, one thing is for certain. It's ancient. Over the arc, there's an inscription in a language he's never seen before. He frowns, tilts his head as though the new angle might give him a clue about the words. Instead, the surface of the mirror moves. In the abandoned classroom heavy silence, the gasp Regulus lets out sounds like the crack of thunder. It's impossible. They are not. Regulus looks around wildly, checks behind him just in case. He knows it's impossible. He would have noticed if they were here. They are not. His eyes confirm he's alone in this room, completely 100% alone, and yet in the mirror. In the mirror, he's not alone at all. The image he's staring at is, well, it's wonderful. He's sandwiched between two people. All three of them wear the magpie's kit, and they all smile. Regulus stares at his reflection, a little shocked by how joyful he looks. Cheeks flushed, the hair windswept. If he had to guess, he just finished a game. Or, at the very least, a practice. It's his dream come true. A professional player, and with the team he's secretly hoping to make. What is this? He whispers, stepping closer to the mirror to examine it further. Sirius stands on his right. He's beaming, hair in a bun at the back of his head. His Quidditch uniform is muddied, and his skin is pink with exertion. The Sirius in the mirror looks radiant. Happy. It makes Regulus's heart ache in the best possible way. But if the person on his right makes his heart beat steady and content, the one on his left makes it throw itself violently against his ribs. James. James with his too tight Quidditch pants, his messy hair, his dazzling smile. James, whose fingers are curled around Regulus's, which hold a little golden ball like he's about to raise his arms in celebration. The mirror is cold to the touch. Regulus's hand is shaking, but he can't help himself. He needs to get closer. He needs to understand. What is this? Is it? His heart throws itself against his ribs again. Is this the future? A small sound escapes his lips, followed by a shuddering breath. It fogs the glass. Oh, if only. There's nothing he wouldn't give to make the team. To play with Sirius and James, to be the reason they look this happy, this proud. His eyes dip to the place where James touches him. His hand is bigger than Regulus's, dwarfing it as it closes around the snitch. James has never held his hand before, but suddenly it's all Regulus can think about. It doesn't matter if it's just for Quidditch purposes. He can't imagine a lovelier thing than to feel James's finger curled over his own. You are embarrassing, he mutters into the empty room, but he can't stop himself. He runs his index finger over the image, traces the lines of it, lingers on the gleam in James's eyes, on the cheeky smile on his lips, on the way he's looking at Regulus. He doesn't know what this mirror is, where it came from. It's a curious thing, almost too good to be true, no? Oh no, shit. Salazar's bollock. What if it's a prank? What if someone's on the other side? What if they are watching him trace the lines of James's face, watching him be all emotional about this? Alarmed, Regulus forces himself away from the mirror. He can hear his blood rushing in his ears. He should know better than to fall for something like this. So stupid. Before he can show any further weakness, Regulus yanks open the door and leaves the room and its strange mirror behind. The image on it, however, haunts him well into his dreams. February 1979. Regulus doesn't relax for a week. He keeps expecting someone to point their finger at him and laugh, call him out on his weakness, or tell the whole school he almost cried staring into a mirror. On Sunday, Barty and Evan inquire after his Saturday evening in that way they always do when they are very clearly hoping he will confess to some salacious activity. Inevitably, he disappoints them again. They roll their eyes, but don't press the point. Regulus doesn't tell them about the room or the mirror or what he saw in it. When the following weekend rolls around and no one has done or said anything out of the ordinary, Regulus lets himself breathe. Perhaps the mirror wasn't a prank. Maybe it's just one of the magical oddities that Dumbledore stores in the castle for safekeeping. And there, another thought. I want to say it again. It's not smart. He's also not certain he can find his way back to that specific room. Besides, he's too busy. The mountain of schoolwork he has to get through is taller than he is. There's the mystery of the petals, shoved aside for now but ever present in a corner of his mind. Not to mention prefect meetings and Quidditch training. The game against Ravenclaw is in a week. Where did the time go? How is it already February? Regulus? Barty asked, his head poking out from between the curtains of his bed. Evan is in detention for some incident in herbology, but due back in a bit. Immediately, Regulus's hackles rise. Barty almost never uses his full name. He stops by the door to their room and turns around, glaring at his friend with suspicion. Yes? Where are you going? Library. The jar in his back is a constant weight at the back of his mind, like someone is sitting where his skull meets his neck. He's so painfully aware of it at all times, it's almost comical. He might even laugh at his own obsession if he wasn't so desperate to find the answer, that is. No, you're not, Barty says slowly, sliding off the bed. There's a painfully obvious hickey under his jaw that Regulus can't stop staring at, no matter how much he wants to look away. Come on, we're going to a party at the edge of the forest. You should come. I'm busy. You're 17, and you behave like a grandpa. Come on, we won't let you make it to the library even if you try, Barty says, waving a hand in the air. What's that supposed to mean? Regulus asks, frowning. He takes in Barty's barely contained grin, the gleam in his eyes. Of course. The birds, those were you, weren't they? Desperate times. Barty doesn't even look contrite. What an ass. Regulus feels his cheek constrict. It takes effort to force the next few words out. And the mirror? What mirror? The birds chased me to a room with a mirror. Regulus braces himself. He might have to hurt his best friend, and he's not loving it. This feels like too big a betrayal of a trust. Like, they did? Oh shit. Sorry, Reggie. They were supposed to stop accosting you the moment you turned away from the library. We just wanted you to come back and hang out with us, Barty admits, rubbing the back of his neck. Now he does look apologetic. We must have fucked something up. Regulus is so relieved he sways on his feet. He knows Barty like the palm of his hand. Sure, it's annoying when he and Evan read him easily, but the flip side is that Regulus can read them too. Barty isn't lying. They might have charmed the birds, but they don't know about Mirror. An accident. A coincidence. A sign from the universe, maybe. Don't do that again, Regulus tells him sharply. I'm not going to a party tonight or any other night. I'm too busy. You know that. Reggie. It's fine, just I have things to do. Don't worry about it. You two have fun. Defeated, Barty throws himself back onto his bed. Regulus tries not to break into a run until he's far enough from the common room he's sure no one will see him. Madame Pins doesn't comment on the fact that Regulus checks out 5 different books on courses at once. She smiles at him, nods as he signs them out, then waves him away. It's almost time for the library to close, but Regulus has a new place to study. A quiet, secluded place where no one will find it odd. He's reading materials outside of the new syllabus. With the help of the map, it only takes him 40 minutes to find the room again. He takes a few wrong turns, has to double back a couple of times, but he finds it. He recognizes the door. It's been burned into his retinas forevermore. Holding his breath, Regulus pushes the handle. He fights the urge to pump his fist into the air, thinking of that Muggle film he and Sirius watched last year with Remus. Rather, he settles for a soft yes, and hurries to close the door behind him. There's no lock, but his fingers have left prints in the dust collected on the handle. He's fairly certain no one comes down here, and if they do, it's been a long, long time. The mirror is where it was last Sunday, as beautiful and strange as ever. He half expected to break into a run the moment he saw it. That's what he imagined doing the entire walk here. After all, it's all he's been thinking about. How it would make him feel to see the image again, to see his own flushed and triumphant face, his brother's proud smile, and James holding his hand. Yet here he is, moving so slowly a snail would outpace him. His pulse skyrockets. What if the image is different this time? What if, no matter how much he wants to see what he saw before, the mirror shows him something else? Regulus sets the book in his arms on the floor. He's methodical about arranging his messenger bag beside it, the jar giving a soft clunk when it's set on the stone floors. The mirror feels like a second person in the room. It calls to him. Come look, come closer, come see what's inside. He closes his eyes, takes a deep breath, and marches across the floor. 5 paces and he's there, standing in front of his reflection, looking at himself in the magpie's kit and, oh, yes, they are there. Sirius is as flushed as he is, head thrown back in a bright laugh. That's new. A shift in the previous image. His arm is around Regulus's shoulder, a comforting squeeze. It's not something Sirius does often unless Regulus initiates it. With the lump in his throat, he shifts his gaze to look at James. This time, their hands aren't joined. Regulus holds the snitch in his fist, its golden wings fluttering weakly between his fingers. James doesn't reach for him to show the stadium what he's caught. Maybe that was only the first time. Regulus pouts, maybe to stop the zing of disappointment that even in this fake future, he doesn't get to have James. What a piece of... His mouth snaps shut as he watches James' fingers circle his wrist, then slide down, down, down until his fingers are intertwined with Regulus's, the snitch caught between their palms. Hazel eyes shift behind round glasses, their focus on Regulus even as this mirrored version of himself looks out. Don't you see him looking at you, you idiot? Regulus sits, glaring at his own reflection. Why aren't you paying attention? He's literally holding your hand. But the reflection doesn't change again. It stayed this way, almost exactly as Regulus first saw it, with James's hand in his and Sirius smiling proudly. With a defeated sigh, Regulus turned on his heel to collect his books. He grabs the jar from his bag and takes it all with him to sit right in front of the mirror. He expects his reflection to shift when he moves, but it doesn't. Even as he sits, the mirror still shows him standing in his magpie's kit with his brother and James at his side. Oddly, it's comforting to know the image remains this way. James aside, it's a mirage to remind him he's working towards. What he stands to lose if he doesn't perform, if he doesn't figure out this damn petal problem. He starts with the basic, curses and counter-cursed by Vindicus Viridian. It covers jinxes first, then hexes. He flips through these chapters if only to cross every possibility of his list. Oh, how he wishes this was a simple jelly legs jinx or tickling hex. Those, at least, would feel in his element. He's the smartest in his year, top of his class. Solving a simple jinx or hex would be child's play. Except nothing. He flips to the chapter on curses, runs his finger down the short alphabetized list, and clicks his tongue. Bubbling curse, cruciatus curse, expulso, fiendfire. The list stretches all the way to transmogrifiantorcio, yet there's nothing that would align with flowers. The closest could be slugus erecto, but he's coughing up petals, nutslugs. At a loss, He flips aimlessly through the pages describing more obscure curses. Blood malediction. At this, he pauses. With careful hands, he cracks the book open to read a little easier in the dim light. A blood malediction is a curse carried in the blood through generation of a family, causing disease and, at its worst, even death. Often called maledictus, plural maledictuses, the individual who carries such a blood curse may see its effect manifest at any stage in life. They may also never see its effects manifest at all. This is dependent on the condition of the initial curse placed on the bloodline. These maledictions are often known in colloquial terms as blood curses. They are generally carried through family lines, often lying dormant until triggered. It is unknown at this time if a curse exists for blood malediction. Note: a werewolf is not considered a maledictus. For information about werewolf, consult Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander. Regulus slams the book shut with a huff. He's not cursed. No one in his family has ever been cursed. His father's side might have plenty of enemies, but none so bold as to curse their family. Besides, he and Sirius have been gone long enough his father's worst enemies wouldn't bother touching them. There's no benefit. As far as Orion Black is concerned, he doesn't have two sons at all. And Regulus's mother? Well, he doesn't know a damn thing about her side of the family, except that at some point in the 1600s they migrated from Japan to France, and in the mid-1800s left France to England. Their family name, their language, and even the defining characteristic of their bloodline were lost to generations of mixed family trees. He considered it highly unlikely that the blood curse would survive so many twists and turns. The branches are bent so far back at this point that Regulus isn't sure who's a cousin or an aunt or a great-grandmother. Some people might even be several of those at once. All he knows for certain is that Sirius is his brother, and they agreed to marry outside of their cousins. Sirius, at least, is holding up his end of their promise. Remus Lupin couldn't be farther away from the gnarled family tree they unfortunately belonged to. Regulus glances up at the reflection in front of him. It's changed slightly in the time he's been reading. Sirius's arm is no longer around his shoulders, but he still stands close with the same boasting smile. He almost doesn't want to look, but Regulus turns his focus to where James's fingers are still entwined with his around the snitch, the heels of their palms pressed together. Of all that might have changed, this at least stayed the same. With a sigh, Regulus pushes to his feet. He crouches to gather the book in his arms, then reaches for the jar. It's been a while since he added a petal to the collection at the bottom. Could it be over? The whole nightmare brought to an end just like that? He doubts it. Mulls it over as he stuffs the jar in his messenger bag and hikes the book higher in his arms. A possibility, but one he doesn't put a whole lot of weight in. He gives a last glance to the mirror, though its surface is clear now. A part of him knows he should find out what it is, what it's called. The draw to it, the need to see what's in it, to understand its meaning, is all a recipe for potential danger. He's sat through enough defense against the dark arts classes to know that any object that draw isn't an object to play with, except is only a mirror, and he's only as strong as curiosity that brought him back to it.